Hello. I would like to talk about our research, attachment and perceived marital conflict, and the ID number is 1152. So the researchers, me, that's Ceren Karaatmaca, I'm from University of Kyrenia, and there's also another assistant professor, Ayse Gozde Koyuncu from Near East University. And the third researcher is Professor Dr. Dilek Ozen from Istanbul Atlas University. So what we will talk about, first, background and introduction part. We will go into details about attachment, relationships, concept of conflict and marital conflict, the nature of marriage and the child, marital conflict perception and attachment, as well as the aim and research questions and the methods, and about the findings. So the marital conflict experienced by the mother and relationship between attachment styles and perceived relative conflict. And we will talk about the discussion and conclusion at last. When we check the background and introduction, first the attachment and the relationships. When we talk about the social development, it means the childhood experiences, the family interrelations, the relationship between the parents, marriage conflict. And one of the theories that's very important in social development is Bowlby's attachment theory, and it talks about the strong emotional ties with important others, actually. And when we talk about the concept of conflict and also marital conflict, we can describe conflict as a window through which the function of a close binary relationship can emerge, and origin of conflict in marriage. There are many different researchers on this, and it's talking about the gender communication differences, the income differences, the age of marriage, the root families, cultural differences, and the differences about problem-solving skills, or the difficulties about the problem-solving skills. And when we look at the adult attachment styles in the literature, it says the attachment starts in childhood and continues in the adulthood mainly. And there are four main styles in adults. One is the secure one, the dismissive avoidant one, the second one, and the anxious preoccupied one, and the fearful avoidant one, and it's also described as a disorganized one. And the nature of marriage and the child involved in the conflict of marriage can feel unhappy, frightened, desperate, and self-blame. So the question is, do they come out to be insecure? And the marital conflict, also when we look in detail in the literature, in many different research, is a risk factor, could be a risk factor for the child's psychological well-being, and could lead to certain things like developing insecure attachment style, as we will see in this research, feeling under threat, blaming him herself, psychosocial adjustment disorder, feeling of worthlessness, hatred towards marriage, high level of stress, anxiety in interpersonal relationships, aggression towards peers. We will be focusing mainly on this developing insecure attachment style, and also in our data collection tools, in this measure of marital conflict perceived by the child, usually feeling under threat and blaming himself, factors are also put under scope. And when we check about the attachment styles and marital conflict, parents being accessible and constant in developing a secure relationship is one of the main things. And negative events in mother's own private life, for example, conflicts in her marriage and problems in terms of accessibility and acceptability could affect marital conflict and also attachment styles, as we see in the literature. And so the marital conflict can activate the attachment system as a stressing factor, but also in some of the research we saw, it also allows the spouses to manage their emotions and behaviors and can activate actually closeness search behaviors, and is also an important factor in attachment, this closeness search and behaviors. So, but when we check about the chronic marital conflict researches, and we see it affects parents' feelings in the negative, and so deprivation of their own child's emotional needs, and child can think that I'm not important and I'm rejected. So, and also it can lead in future marital conflict of the child. And when we look at the intergenerational link of the attachment, firstly, we can say adults' internal attachment patterns also affect the way they treat their own children. And secondly, attachment patterns of these adults may be related to the security of the attachment exhibited by their children. And when we look at the studies that was done before, 3/4 of the mother-child couples are in the same attachment category. So, coming from this background, we form our aim and research questions. The main thing is to examine the relationship of the mother and the child, their attachment styles, and perceived marital conflicts relation with this attachment. First question, what are the mother's and children's attachment styles? We will discuss more in cultural terms. And is there an intergenerational transition of the attachment styles of the mothers and children? And what's the effect of marital conflict perceived by the children on the possible transmission of attachment styles? So we didn't know, firstly, if there's a transmission of attachment style. So if there's a possible transmission, then what's the effect of marital conflict on this transmission of the attachment style? The method we use is a relational screening method, SEM method, and model, and its ability is to impute relationship between unobserved constructs, latent variables, and observable variables. We will see more in detail in the results part. When we look at the sampling, we have 112 mother-child couples, we can say, and 112 mothers of age average 47, and child age average is like between 90 and 20. And we also check the age when mother bore her first child. And other demographic sampling details is mother's education. We see here 5% primary school, 27% high school, 63% undergraduate, and 5% graduate. And children's education is 28% high school, 69% undergraduate and all. And when we look at the children gender, 52% female, 48% male. On the gender focus, we will be discussing in another study. So I'm not going to be discussing further in detail in the gender perception. And when we check the data collection tools, we first have the descriptive characteristics form, then we have the relations questionnaire, which was originally developed by Bartolomeu and Horowitz in 1991 and adapted in Turkish by Sümer and Güngör in 1999. And also we have another scale, that's Marital Conflict Perceived by Children scale, originally developed by Grich and Fincham in 1992 and adapted into Turkish again by Oz by 1999. And in the data analysis part, we used SPSS and AMOS programs. And for calculating the scores of participants from the relationship scale, self and others model scores, self model equals to secure and avoiding minus obsessive plus fearful, and others model is secure plus preoccupied minus avoiding and fearful. And according to the 4 attachment models of Bartolomeu Horowitz, which I discussed in the background of part in this presentation. And we also checked the pathway analysis with AMOS, and that's the intergenerational transition and effect of the marital conflict perceived. And we also have frequency distribution tables, as we will see in the findings part. In the findings, first, as I said, is the description of mothers and children's attachment styles, and secondly, intergenerational transition effect of the marital conflict that's perceived by the children. Firstly, description of the mothers and the children's attachment styles. So, as we see here, the secure one we see here. Here we will have the dismissive avoidant one. Here we have the preoccupied anxious one. And here we have the fearful avoidant disorganized one. That's for our Turkish sample for our mother-child couples on the attachment styles. So we will discuss further in this presentation and in our article that we have written. And when we check the findings about intergenerational transition and effect of marital conflict perceived, as I explained, we have in the scale, a child perceived marital conflict scale, we have 3 subdimensions like threat, self-blame, and conflict properties. And we checked about the effects on the mother attachment scale and child attachment style. And we checked about the secure, fearful, preoccupied, and avoidant different attachment styles that was defined by Bartolomeu. So, coming from these findings, we come to the discussion and conclusion parts. And firstly, description about mothers and children's attachment styles in our Turkish sample. Secure style, most common in all culture, we see in literature. But we see cultural differences mainly occurs in distribution of insecure styles. So as we can say collectivist cultures and individualistic cultures. And we is the simplest definition of a collectivistic culture, and I is the simplest definition of an individualistic culture. And we see when we check about the cultural differences, the collectivistic cultures like Israel and Japan, low rate avoidant attachment style and high rate preoccupied attachment style. And the individualistic cultures like Germany, UK, Netherlands, Sweden, US, high rate avoidant attachment style and low rate preoccupied attachment style. And in our current study, which we can call Turkish sample as the collectivistic culture, like Israel and Japan, we see mothers avoidant lower than preoccupied, but child avoidant higher than preoccupied, and children closer to individualistic culture. And in our article, we are discussing, is this about world being more global? Is this about technology leading to loneliness of these children? Or is this about parenting styles of XY generation different than baby boomer generation that were the mothers of the XY generation mostly? So we are discussing about these cultural differences in those senses. And when we check the child's perceived marriage conflict and the transition of intergenerational attachment styles, first, mother's secure attachment styles affect children's secure attachment styles, and the attachment styles of mother didn't have a significant role in children's perceived marital conflict, but perceived marital conflict affects children's attachment style. These were the two main outcomes of this model. And we say mother's secure attachment styles affect children's secure attachment styles. So securely attached mothers may be open to their children's attachment signals and develop a secure relationship with their own children. So, and if there's insecurity, lack of open communication can also cause insecure attachment of the child. And the attachment style of mothers didn't have a significant role in children's perceived marital conflict one, but the perceived marital conflict affects children's attachment style one. We can say chronic marital conflict affects the feelings of the parents, deprivation in providing the emotional needs of their own children. And as we said, children think that I'm not cared, I feel rejected. And there's also this emotional security hypothesis. So it's working about the effect of marital conflict on the children and focuses on the relationship between children's level of perception of meaning and conflict in their parents' marital conflict and their emotional security. And in this case, we are discussing about emotion regulation, internal representations of family relationships, and regulation of family exposure to conflicts. The participants who think that their parents are less satisfied in their marriage experience more frequent and violent conflicts, exhibit more insecure attachment styles. So these were the main items that I would be discussing in our presentations. We can find all these in detail in our article. And thank you so much for your time and listening to us.